so let's focus on the basic Git commands. It is worth starting with the commands that will allow us to set the global Git settings. This allows us to determine our name and email address. These settings are stored in a home directory. On the Windows system, it will be the users folder, and inside it a folder with the username of our system. Of course, we can change this data anytime we want. Using the onSet parameter, we can delete a certain record and this field will be empty. If we skip the global parameter, we will set our data to a specific local repository only. Such settings are stored in the repository in the configuration file. By not providing a username or email address with this command, we can check what our current settings are. With the last command on this slide, we can see what code editor is currently the default one for Git on our system. We can check the content of the file with the global settings. With the tilde key, you can refer to your home directory no matter where you are at the moment and view the content of that file. With the list parameter, you will see a list of your global or local settings if you skip the global parameter. Git init, the most basic command we need to know. It creates the new repository in the folder where we wrote this command. We can also indicate the path where the repo is supposed to be created. We can create a repository in a completely empty directory or in a directory that already has some files and folders in it. Git init path. As I said a moment ago, we can indicate the place where we want to create our repository. If we type git init counter app, our repository will be created in the folder counter app relative to where we are. If such a folder does not exist, it will be created. We can also give the entire path to our file, starting from the hard disk drive. It is also worth remembering the h and help parameters. We can use these parameters for many commands. The h parameter with a single dash will show us the additional parameters available for a certain command. The help parameter with a double dash will open the documentation record for a specific command on which we used it. The documentation is installed on our hard drive along with Git clone. This is an alternative for the git init command. We can create a repository by cloning a repository that already exists. We can clone local repositories on our hard drive or remote ones using HTTPS or SSH protocol. Cloning is creating a new repository that is identical to the cloned one. Here are some examples of using the git clone command. Most often we will just write the git clone command in the place where the repository we want to clone is located. After space we will type the name of this repository, and again after space we can type the name of the folder we want to move the cloned repository to. Another very important command is git add. This command adds the current version of the files in our working directory to the staging area. We can add any modified or newly created file to the staging area, regardless of whether it is currently tracked or untracked. This command requires a parameter, or as it also can be said, a flag. Here we can see which parameters, also known as the flags, we can use for the git add command. To add all the files in our working directory, we can use the capital A letter with a single dash, the parameter all with a double dash or a dot. You can also indicate a specific file or even several files after space. The next command, git status. It allows us to find out what is the current state of the changes in our project in relation to the last commit. We can see the tracked and untracked files. We can see the changes to the tracked files and the changes in the staging area. Git commit. Committing your changes in the staging area and saving them to the Git repository. Git commit allows us to update our repository. But what does the commit do? It creates the commit object in the database. It creates the information about a new commit in the branch we are in. And it sets the head indicator to the most recent change. We will talk about the head element later on. If you want to test out various Git commands and see how commit paths are created, at the bottom of the screen you have a source that you may be interested in. Git commit with the m flag or the m parameter. Git requires the commit to include a commit message for the changes. If we won't do this in a command line with the m parameter, the default code editor will open, in which we can enter our commit message. And let's learn a few rules for writing the commit messages. First of all, our commit message doesn't have to consist of a single line. We can think of the first line of the message as the title. Sometimes one line is enough to write everything that a certain commit relates to, but there is no problem for the commit message to be longer. Once in a command line, we can go to a new line while typing by pressing Shift and Enter on our keyboard. Remember that the first line of the commit message should be its title, the second line should be empty, and the rest of the message can be included in the following lines. It is important that a single line does not exceed 60 characters because it might not be displayed correctly in a command line. The commit message should be written in English using the present simple tense. Generally speaking, we should do the commits frequently enough to keep the commit messages short and concise. Now let's talk about the git commit command with the a parameter with a single dash or the all parameter with the double dash. This command takes two steps in one. First of all, it takes all the tracked modified files from the working directory to the staging area. Remember, however, that in this case we are only talking about the tracked files, because the git add all command also transfers the untracked files to the staging area. Git command all does not do that. Secondly, this command does the commit. Instead of the a or all parameter, we can also use the name of the file which changes the commit applies to. Git commit amend. Something went wrong and we want to fix the latest commit. We can change its content and the commit message. Then the metadata of this commit will also change. If we only want to change the commit message itself, we can use the shorter version of this command, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. The git log command is the commit history from the latest to the newest in our repository. Remember about the Q key on your keyboard, which will let you go back to the active command line if the commit list is too long for one screen. We can also use various parameters for this command. We can display each commit in one line with only the basic information, indicate how many recent commits we want to display, or indicate the date from which our commits are supposed to be displayed. And with this command, we can search for the commit that has the phrase placed in the quotation marks in its commit message. In the given example, we are looking for a commit that contains the phrase create in its commit message, and as a result, we have received a commit that contains the phrase create index.html in its commit message. Remember that when using this command, the letters are case sensitive. The git log stat command tells us which files the commit changed and how. It also displays the commit list, just like the git log command. The git show command tells us in detail what has changed in the latest commit by default. We can also indicate a specific commit that we want to check if we paste the hash ID of that certain commit. The git diff command shows us by default the difference between the files, between the modified version in the working directory and the version in the staging area. It perfectly shows what has been modified in relation to what is currently in the staging area. We can also indicate the name of a specific file, which versions from the working directory and the staging area we want to compare. We can also use the cached parameter to compare what we have in the staging area with what we have in the latest commit. We can also compare the file versions from different commits. Now let's move on to some of the little more advanced git commands, but still remaining in the area of basics. No time to waste, so let's go.